This coming week, officials from some 33 permanent members of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, as well as government officials from around the world, will descend on Buenos Aires, Argentina, for the CELAC conference. Since its launch in December of 2011, CELAC has helped to deepen a dialogue among all of the countries in the region, working on issues of economic and social and cultural development and integration for the 650 million people of Latin America and the Caribbean. It represents the third largest economy in the world, and it's an important component of the world's rising multilateralism. As such, it's also one of the major battlefields between the old order and the new. For more on that, we're going to go to Esteli, Nicaragua, to speak with journalist Stephen Sefton. Well, Stephen, among the other, spectacles that we're going to see is the return of Brazil in the form of President Lula, and that's one of the things people are talking about. We're also seeing, though, the resurgence of this and some of the other multilateral institutions after seeing a flurry of this activity, beginning perhaps with the presidency of Hugo Chavez in 1999, then the waning of it with they hate to use that pink tide comes in and comes out metaphor because it doesn't really work, but the tug-of-war going on basically between two systems, between left and right, I guess, to characterize it, between the people and elites, and between the region and the United States, among others.
Yeah, I agree very much with that, Don. I think you can see it both at a very high level in terms of international relations, and you can also see it very, very clearly at a national level in all kinds of ways. And just look at what's happening in Peru, where the impoverished majority there, who had high hopes after the election, a very narrow win, but he was elected as president, Pedro Castillo, and he was a person of very humble origin, a teacher, very well known for his work as a teacher and his work in the National Teachers Union in Peru, and they were hoping for concrete steps that would improve their lives. And what's happened is that Castillo was blocked constantly by the ruling elite through their political representation, and he was effectively unable to govern. They made it impossible for him to govern or implement his policies. It's an open question whether something similar will happen in Brazil, because Lula da Silva also won by a very narrow margin, an unexpectedly narrow margin against Jair Bolsonaro. And we've just seen over the last couple of weeks this somewhat strange insurrection, which a lot of people are calling a coup attempt. And for the moment, as a result, Lula has the initiative. But how long will that last? We don't know.
You could have said again, by the way, because this is what we went through in 2016. They removed Dilma Rousseff from office.
In a slightly different form.
Yes.
That was but you're right, yeah. And so what you have in Brazil is the same as in Peru, a very reactionary ruling elite determined to continue business as usual as far as they're concerned and keep the impoverished majority in their place in living conditions that majority are determined to improve. So you have, as you said at the beginning, we have this tug-of-war going on between these forces, and pink tide people outside Latin America may find that metaphor useful, but it actually explains next to nothing.
Right.
And so if you look at, you need to look at what's happening inside these countries to understand how complex and how difficult the and how intractable in many countries, as we can see in Peru and Brazil, and also in Argentina, where the CELAC summit will be held.
Right.
And symbolic of that struggle, that tug of war in Argentina over the last few days, has been the case of Milagro Sala, a very popular grassroots politician in Argentina, and she has been the victim of effectively lawfare, the abuse of judicial structures for political purposes, and as one might expect, when her case reached the Supreme Court in Argentina, dominated by the right wing, the same Supreme Court that has worked to prevent Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner from running in the next presidential elections later this year in November. That Supreme Court confirmed the sentence of, I think it's a total of 13 years in jail for Milagro Sala on basically very, very clearly trumped up charges. And so that is an expression of and another expression. There's lots of support for Milagro Sala, but the right-wing structures, the reactionary structures in Argentina are imposing their will, and that's just another sign of the way the reactionary elites work across the whole of South America and Central America and the Caribbean too, to some extent. But that's they're different stories in those two regions. But anyway, getting back to the CELAC, that struggle between the majority demanding a decent life and determined to get it, on the one hand, the reactionary elites determined to hang on to their business as usual, their corruption, their control of their institutional control in their countries. They're equally determined to hang on to that. So you have this constant shock of opposing forces, and that is also, in my opinion, I might be wrong about this, that's reflected at a very high international level. Absolutely. In which CELAC is likely to be a key player. I think that speculation about whether or not CELAC will be able to survive or not as a viable body is probably too pessimistic. And I think that all the elements exist for CELAC to thrive, mainly because of the situation in Eurasia, and involving China and the countries, for example, of the Eurasian Economic Union. And recently, unless I'm mistaken, there was an actually formal official declaration by the representatives of the Eurasian Economic Union and the People's Republic of China that they would both work together to merge, in effect, and maybe putting this too simply or too crudely, but in effect what they said was that they were going to merge their infrastructure and investment efforts to get the best synergies, if I'm allowed to use that word, from their respective initiatives. And so what does that represent? That represents the majority world turning around and saying, right, we're determined to have a better life.
That's right. And that's really the point of all of this rising multilateral world. And thank you for bringing us to that point, and we'll speak with you again after the conference next week. Thank you, Stephen.
Okay, thanks a million, Don. Look forward to it.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.